Sometimes you just can't get your EQ to sit right. Your bass is sounding really boomy, so you cut the offending frequency, but now it sounds lifeless and it's lost all of the richness from the low end. Your vocals are sounding harsh, but then you try and smooth them with a bit of EQ, and you find that they lack clarity and they don't cut through the mix anymore. It can really take the wind out of your sails, it can ruin an otherwise great gig, and it can leave you sitting there thinking, am I even cut out for this? Why don't my mixes sound as smooth as the big shots? What if I told you that the answer is not the way that you're using EQ, but the type of EQ that you're using? Enter dynamic EQ. In this video, I'm going to take you through what dynamic EQ is, how to set it up sort of on most mixers, and a couple of use cases for it for you to get nice, smooth mixes that really punch and things cut through. If we've not met yet, I'm Andrew. I've been mixing live concerts for about 10 years or so, and I use dynamic EQ basically every day. If you're just looking for fundamentals of EQ, you can check out my free EQ guide, 3 Steps to Perfect EQ. It's in the link in the description down below, and it just outlines sort of my philosophy for EQ. Quite useful if you're going to watch this video. Without further ado, let's dive in. So part 1, what is dynamic EQ? So you're probably thinking, dynamics plus EQ. Dynamics is like compression, EQ is EQ. So it must be a combination of compression and EQ. And you wouldn't be terribly far off, right? It's very, very similar to a multi-band compressor in that like you can apply different amounts of gain boosting and reduction to different areas of the frequency spectrum, depending on how much energy there is in that particular band. So it has, you know, release controls, it has a ratio control, but the thing that really separates it from a multi-band compressor is that you have total control over the Q, how wide the band is, and the sort of amount of gain that you are willing to let it boost or cut. So basically, it looks like a regular EQ, but it reacts based on how much energy there is in the band where you've cut or boosted. Now, if this sounds too good to be true, maybe sometimes it is. It tends to not be available on cheaper mixers. Things like Behringer X32 doesn't have a dynamic EQ, but kind of more mid-range to high-end mixers do have them. Things like D-Live, Yamaha QL and CL series, Midas Pro series, Midas HD series, and probably a million other mixers. Most of the time you insert it in the effects rack and set it up as an insert effect. I'll leave a link to a video if you don't know about insert effects. But some mixers, like the D-Live and the HD96, have dedicated dynamic EQ slots that you can assign channels to without cutting into your other effect slots. Let's take a look at setting them up then. Quick announcement, I've started offering one-to-one calls, one-to-one support for live sound. So if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, you can book a free 15-minute call down below. I'll ask you a few questions, try and see if I can get you a quick win, find out if we're fit for working together, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, so I've got the D-Live mixer here, or rather I'm running the D-Live director on my computer. You see I've got a vocal channel, right? I want a dynamic EQ on it. So I could head to the insert point A, right? And I just click this open and pick Dyne 8 as the multiband effects unit. And then I click apply and it opens up like this. It's got multiband compressor and it has a dynamic EQ down the bottom. You can have this overview screen or you can click into each of them, right? So let's focus on the dynamic EQ. Looks like a regular EQ, doesn't it, right? You know, you can choose your band, right? And you can boost and cut. I won't talk about that. The thing that's different is that when you make a cut, right, you're defining how much the maximum amount of gain reduction is, how much you want to reduce that frequency by at its most extreme. And beyond that, you can mess about with this band here. So let's widen it a little bit. Let's say that we have a boomy guitar and we want to cut in the middle here. Now the thing we can use is we can use this threshold control here to decide how much of that frequency we're going to cut based on the amount of energy at that point. So if there's tons of 500 hertz at a certain note in the guitar, then the EQ is going to kick in and it's going to reduce the energy at 500 hertz just when that note plays, right? But then the rest of the time it's going to chill out. You know, and then if we pulled the threshold down even more, it might start reducing those frequencies a little bit, even when that note is not being played. Just depends on what's in the frequency spectrum. You'll see that these two are independent, right? So when I adjust this band, it doesn't adjust the threshold. However, when I adjust the threshold, it does adjust the band. Play around with it, you'll get used to it. And then each band as well has a release time, right? And you can change the release time between, on this one, standard 9 and fast 9. I don't know why there's a 9 there, and the manual didn't tell me either, but standard is standard and fast is fast. Another really cool feature of this one and other dynamic EQs is that you can create a sidechain input, right? So over on the left here, you could pick a sidechain input. let's say input here. Let's say that, let's pretend that the kick drum is actually a guitar. So now when the sidechain input sounds, so whenever the kick drum sounds, the EQ band will listen to what's happening in the kick drum and will apply that EQ move to the vocal. Not that you would ever do this in real life, it's just what I have set up in this demo file. And you can choose the sidechain input band by band. You've got one input, but you can choose each band to be cued by itself, so the vocal, or cued by the sidechain input, so the kick drum. As well as that, you can choose whether you want the band to listen to the whole frequency spectrum with this wide button, or just the area of the frequency spectrum that you're defining with this EQ band, right? So let's say you're listening to the kick drum and you only want to, do something with the vocals, cut the bass in the vocals when the kick drum sounds at 50 Hertz. You find 50 Hertz, you pull it down, and then you change that band to be external, so sidechain input, and split. So it's listening to 50 Hertz on the kick drum. If this video has been helpful to you so far, I would love it if you could subscribe to the channel. I'm going to make a video following up on this about how to get a great vocal using dynamic EQ. Another button that you'll see on this guy is the above and below control, right? And that's basically like how it reacts to the signal. If you've got above selected, right, this EQ starts to come into play as the signal goes above the threshold, right? So the further past the threshold you go, the more reduction you get in that EQ band. However, if you were like saying you were boosting something when it was too quiet, you would set it to below, right? And then whenever the signal here falls below the threshold, then you might have a EQ boost applied. So let's say when a vocalist sings really, really quietly, they don't have the same body or clarity or something in their vocal. Maybe they get up close to the mic. Maybe at that point you want to boost some clarity in their vocal. That's when you would use the above or below situation. To show you another quick couple of examples to get the point across, right? Here we have the Midas HD96 software running on a computer. Again, looks exactly the same as the mixer, and similar thing, right? We would pick our channel. Here I've got a vocal channel, and then you would find your EQ. So I need to go to, where is it? Channel view maybe? Yeah. And so you've got your EQ, and down the bottom left here, you see this effects section here, and it says Ultima Equalizer Usage, right? You can click on one of these slots, and then in the slot, you can click Add Internal, as in add internal effects. And then up the top here, there's got a dynamics pool. And this is all the available inserts we have just for dynamic EQ. So I could pick whatever slot I want and load up a dynamic EQ. And you see that it looks really, really similar to the other one, right? You've got your bands, you can drag them around, pull them, drag them, drop them. For each band, you've got your ratio control, you've got your width, you can change the type of shelving or band pass it is, change the frequency, that sort of thing. This one also has a sidechain input. If you're using the HD96, then you need to learn the routing screen. I don't know where it is, patching screen. You need to go in here and patch the input into the effects on the side over here. It's a whole thing. I'm not quite used to it yet. I'll make a video when I've spent a bit more time on the mixer. Okay, and so a third example, right, slightly less user-friendly is this Yamaha CL series editor, right? But same thing, right? If you've been on a Yamaha CL series, you open up your effects rack, and then you look over here, right, into premium effects. You click a slot and you load up, your dynamic EQ. You open up your dynamic EQ and you see it looks the same, right? You drag it. The gain is linked to the ratio control down here. You can pull it over. You can affect the threshold. You can affect the Q. You have a sidechain input. You have release controls. You see that it works in a very, very similar way. The difference in this one is that you have to insert the effect yourself. So the question is how do you use it, right? And the answer is you use it when a regular EQ doesn't quite cut it. When you're making an EQ move and you find that half of the time it doesn't sound good, or even 10% of the time it doesn't sound good if you're looking for that ultimate perfection, then you need to start applying that EQ only when the sound source needs it, and you use a dynamic EQ for that. The same principles apply as regular EQ, right? Like cut before you boost. I see a lot of people using this. I don't see a lot of people boosting with this. So stick to cuts. But you're a professional, you can decide if you need to boost. Let's say that you have a harsh vocal, right? You're using an SM58 and it's just feeling a bit nasty, right? And so you grab your EQ and you drag it 3.5K or something and it just doesn't sound good. So you head to your dynamic EQ, right? And you pull your band over to like 3.5K and you make it nice and wide, don't you? And then you drag the gain down, right? Make it nice and wide. And then you just feather in the threshold until you're getting the amount of reduction in that band that you want. So that when you hear the vocal gets a bit harsh, You just pull the threshold down and the EQ takes it away, but only when it's sounding harsh, right? Cleans your vocal up real nice. You can do it with the kind of low end of the vocal as well. If someone's getting in close to the microphone, it's too boomy, but they pull the microphone away and suddenly there's no presence anymore. Dynamic EQ in the low end, only reduce the low frequencies when you are really up close to that microphone. Another example would be bass, right? If your bass is super, super muddy, right? Like 100 hertz, I find is just always offending me somehow in a bass, but then if I cut it, where does it go, right? Take a dynamic EQ, grab your band. Where are we? Let's grab one here. Grab your band, move it to 100 hertz. Keep it nice and narrow, like this one. Nice and narrow, and then just feather in that threshold so that when it gets really, really boomy, it reduces it just a little bit. A third example is really, really cool. I was working the other day with James from Rattling Bones Club. I'll leave a link to his YouTube channel down below. It's really, really great. Got loads of amazing sort of just like mix throughs and loads of stuff from touring and tour managing. Like, great guy. Definitely need to check his channel out. But he was showing me just the other day that he has a guitar bus, right? He has a guitar group that his guitars go into. And then the guitar group is actually sidechained to the vocal input, right? And so when the vocals are really, really going for it, it actually dips the guitar in the kind of like 2-3 kilohertz region. So he has this band, I'll show you on here. So he has this like nice wide band of EQ up the top in the clarity range of his vocals, and then he has it set to an external input of the vocal, and when that vocal goes really hard, it dips the guitars at that frequency. So the guitars are still there, the volume is still there, but the clarity of the vocal comes through because the guitars just move out of the way of the vocals when the vocal needs them to move out of the way. But when it's a guitar solo or just big riffs or whatever, it's just there, it's unaffected. So yeah, check out Rattling Bones Club. He was mixing with While She Sleeps. Really cool band, really nice tour, good stuff. So leave a comment down below and let me know if you use dynamic EQ and what you use it for. Do you have any other cool tricks like James did? And I'll leave a video up here about how to insert effects if you need to know that. Until next time, goodbye.